About a couple of hundred years ago, a bunch of people who'd been thrown out of England washed up on a picturesque harbour in the middle of New Zealand and decided to build a town called Wellington. It was the perfect place to live, as it was surrounded by hills that none of them could be bothered walking over, and now Wellington is the second biggest urban area in the country. Everything in Wellington is a little kooky, and Wellingtonians have a tendency to tempt fate for fun. They made landing at the airport an extreme sport and decided the best way to cope with the major fault line running through the area was to put cute little houses all over the steep hills like happy dominoes. And because of the high risk of death by earthquake, the rest of the country thought Wellington would also be a good place to put the government. So in 1980, an architect called Basil Spence built them a building called the Beehive, because it looks like a beehive, which is where all our politicians get drunk. Just down the road from the Beehive is another landmark building called Te Papa, and it's the National Museum of New Zealand. Te Papa is famous for both costing a lot of money and looking like it didn't. It's filled with the most wonderful and brilliant art, and often has tributes to all the New Zealanders that got shot by people from other countries. Paradoxically, lots of those people from other countries now live in Wellington, and everyone gets on like a house on fire, which makes you wonder what the fuss was all about in the first place. But it's the art scene that really sets Wellington apart from the rest of the country. There's a bohemian-style cafe or bar on every corner, literally buzzing with bohemians buzzing about Bohemia. And some of New Zealand's most famous exports have been exported from within the 10-mile radius around the Wellington CBD. 42 Below vodka came from Wellington, but the government wouldn't give them any money to make vodka, so they left. Russell Crowe and Anna Paquin came from Wellington, but the government wouldn't give them any money to be actors, so they left. Flight of the Conchords came from Wellington, no money, left, and of course Catherine Mansfield, who probably didn't even ask the government for money, since she was quite smart and knew they probably wouldn't say no anyway. In fact, when I think about it, Wellington is pretty evenly divided up between people doing really interesting things and government officials telling them not to do them. So the shopping here is quite good, as the interesting people need interesting things to buy and the public servants need sensible shoes. Maybe this is one of the reasons why everyone calls Wellington the Melbourne of New Zealand, apart from the Wellingtonians who call it Welly and refer to Melbourne as being the Wellington of Australia. But shopping aside, it's actually quite a pretty place. You can take the cable car up to Kelvin and look out over God's creation. Or tramp through the hillsides and look out at God's creation. Or drive out to the beaches and look out at God's creation. Or just wander around Oriental Bay and maybe jump off the fountain, which is actually illegal, but people do it anyway as the police aren't that fond of swimming and the harbour's really cold. All in all, it's a lovely little city and you should probably pop over for a visit. Wellington, or as the Wellington City Council PR department call it, absolutely positively Wellington. No one knows what that actually means, but it sounds neat. Win a trip to Wellington, Australians, just by going to this site where you could win a trip to Wellington, if you're Australian. Copper?